These are the world's major oil-producing countries. They have different flags, different cultures, different politics. But they all have one thing in common. That is, they sell oil in US dollars. But if a country owns oil, shouldn't it be free to sell it however it wants? So why do nearly all oil-producing nations, and about 90% of the world's oil sold, using the same currency? And what happens when they don't? To understand why, we have to go back to the 1970s. In the early 1970s, the global financial system was breaking apart. The US had just ended the gold standard, and the dollar needed a new foundation. That's when Washington made a quiet but world-changing deal. In 1974, the United States reached an agreement with Saudi Arabia, the world's most powerful oil producer. Saudi oil would be sold exclusively in US dollars. In return, the US guaranteed military protection, weapons, and political support. Once Saudi Arabia agreed, the rest of OPEC followed. If you wanted oil, you needed dollars. That single rule reshaped the global economy. Countries everywhere now had to hold US dollars, trade in US financial markets, rely on US banking systems. Oil demand became dollar demand, and that demand keeps the dollar dominant even today. But why would US invade and capture President Maduro and took control of Venezuela's oil? If China had successfully struck a deal with Venezuela to sell oil in yuan, it wouldn't just be a trade agreement. It wouldn't just be about energy. It would be a direct challenge to the global financial order. Here's why. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, over 300 billion barrels. That's more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than the United States. At today's prices, that oil represents trillions of dollars locked beneath one country. But oil isn't just fuel. Oil is power. Since the 1970s, global oil trade has been priced almost entirely in US dollars. This system, often called the Petrodollar, forces countries to hold dollars to buy energy, keeping the US currency at the center of the world economy. That system didn't happen by accident. Energy and the dollar became inseparable. Now, fast forward. Over the past decade, multiple countries have tried to weaken that system. China built CIPS, an alternative to SWIFT. BRICS discussed trading outside the dollar. Russia began selling energy in other currencies. And Venezuela, isolated, sanctioned, and desperate, explored selling oil outside the dollar system as well, and was very close to striking a deal with China to counter petrodollar system. That's where history gets uncomfortable. When leaders challenge the global oil currency order, consequences often follow. In 2000, Iraq announced oil sales in euros to counter US sanction and dominance. 3 years later, Saddam Hussein was removed and gone. In 2009, Libya proposed a gold-backed African currency that also challenges dollar. And 2 years later, Gaddafi was gone. In 2025, Venezuela and China, same deal with and sitting president is removed. Correlation doesn't prove causation, but patterns matter in geopolitics. If Venezuela's oil were ever fully integrated into a rival currency system like yuan or ruble or whatever, it wouldn't just affect energy markets. It would threaten dollar demand, US financial leverage, global trade flows, China-US power balance. That's why Venezuela isn't just a South American issue. It's a global choke point. In other words, death of dollar in today's world. Control the oil, you influence the currency. Control the currency, you shape the world economy. This is how modern power works, not by drilling the oil, but by controlling who gets to buy it and in what currency. Geography decides where resources exist. Politics decides who controls the flow. And history shows one thing very clearly.